Hello, history students. So sorry we're not meeting today, but so today we're going to talk about two cards. We have to do two cards to do a little bit of catch up. We're going to talk about God's covenant with Abraham and Hagar and Ishmael. So the first thing I want to talk about is Abram, because that was his name before he was called Abraham. And he lived in a place called Ur. And we've talked a little bit about the Sumer area and the Sumerians. And remember, they had cuneiform as their type of writing. And I want to show you a map, and we'll just have to work with how this works. But I'm going to show you a map of Abraham's journeys before we start. So here is a map, and down here you can see Ur, and this is where Abram and his family was from. And God told them, he said, I want to have some special relationship with you. So I want you to leave the area where you know and go to a place I'm going to show you. So they went from Ur all the way up to Haran. And then from Haran, they ended up going down to Canaan. And in this map, you can see he went down to Egypt and then back to Canaan. We'll talk about that for a little bit. So the interesting thing that I found out about Ur was that in Ur, there is a ziggurat, and they have done some exploration. Archaeology is the digging up of things to find out what's underground. And in Ur, where Abram lived, there's this picture of these ruins. So you can see the ruins in the front, but in the background, there is a ziggurat. Very interesting. Abram knew about ziggurats. And what was very interesting, I found out, was that he knew how to build them. He knew the mathematical formulas that were needed to build ziggurats. But let's back up. Abram gets called by the Lord and goes from Ur to Haran with his whole household. That's his wife Sarai, his father Terah, his brother Haran, and his brother's son Lot. Remember, Lot is Abram's nephew. All of their people. So Abram had lots of flocks, he had lots of animals to take care of. The women in his household would have maids to take care of them and help with all the cooking and everything else like that. So they had a lot of people that they were traveling with. And it wasn't unusual for someone who had a lot of wealth and a lot of animals to have a great big household. So they moved and they went to Haran. And while they were in Haran, Haran passed away and died. And then Terah passed away as well. After Terah dies, the Lord comes and speaks to Abram again and says, I want you to go to Canaan and go there, and I will show you the place where I want you to be. So Abram goes there, but there's a famine. So interestingly enough, Abram goes to Egypt. Now, what I found really interesting was when you look at the dates of Abram and the building of pyramids, Abram was coming to Egypt, and they were already building pyramids in Egypt. In fact, one thing we know about is the Sphinx. Abram might have seen the Sphinx in Egypt because the Sphinx was built before Abram came to Egypt. Isn't that interesting? I think that's just amazing. So Abram goes to Egypt, and if you know this story, the Pharaoh took one look at Sarai and said, that woman is so beautiful. I have to have her in my harem. And Abram was so scared, he thought if they know that Sarai and I are married, they're going to kill me. So he said, just tell them you're my sister. And the truth was, that was half truth, because Sarai was the half sister of Abram. And so she went to live with Pharaoh. The Lord comes to Pharaoh in a dream and says, hey, this woman is married. Pharaoh goes to Abram and says, hey, look, you should have told me you were married and I wouldn't have taken this woman. So it's a good thing that we didn't actually get married. So Abram takes Sarai back, and Pharaoh gives him all this wealth to leave Egypt with. Now see, here's an interesting thing, is they believe that Abram knew some mathematical formulas for building ziggurats, which are kind of like a pyramid shape thing. So they think that Abram knew this mathematical formula called 2 pi r, and you'll need to talk to somebody who's very mathematical to understand that, or you can talk to me sometime if you really want to know. And they think that after Abram visited Egypt, they were able to construct pyramids with this formula, and they have some evidence of that they discovered the formula and built pyramids this way. And they think that one of the reasons why Pharaoh gave Abram so much wealth and animals and things like that was because he gave them this critical bit of information to make pyramid building interesting. So Abram leaves Egypt, and then he goes back to the land of Canaan. Now something very interesting happens. His covenant with the Lord happens. So we have a covenant where God is giving Abram 3 big promises. He's saying, you're going to have lots of heirs, you're going to have lots of land, and lots of blessings. And heirs means having lots of children and grandchildren. So say this with me: heirs, land, and blessings. There's the 3 big things that God is promising Abram. Now that kind of seems silly that Abram's wealthy, right? Why would he need blessings and land and heirs? Well, he needed heirs because he didn't have any children yet. And so God says, I'm going to make a covenant with you. First thing I'm going to do is change your name. And I'm going to put the H in your name, Abraham. And this is going to change your name to Father of Many Nations. Oh, and for Sarai, I'm going to put an H in her name too and change her name to Sarah. And so he did that. Now the Lord God himself is entering into a covenant with Abraham. And he says to Abraham, I need you to bring me 5 animals. I need you to bring me a heifer. And a heifer is a female cow, 3 years old, that hasn't had any babies yet. And I need you to bring me a 3-year-old goat and a 3-year-old ram, and a ram is a male sheep, a pigeon, and a turtle dove. And so this is part of a great covenant ceremony. And Abraham probably knew this ceremony when he was bringing the animals. He knew what was going to have to happen, that the animals were going to be killed and cut in half, and there was going to be this ceremony. But the animals are killed, they're cut in half, but Abraham didn't get a chance to take part in the ceremony. Why? Because the sun went down and the Lord put him to sleep, so he couldn't take part. So that actually shows us that God is so powerful that he doesn't need anybody else to take place to help him have a covenant. He just does it himself and says, this is all on me. You don't have to do anything for this. You just have to say yes. So that, I think, is just wonderful. It's a picture of what Jesus did for us, where Jesus said, you know what? You don't have to try to be good. You don't have to do penance for your sins or anything else like that. Just believe on me. Believe what I did is enough. And that's all you have to do. So Abram entered into this great covenant with the Lord. So he changes his name and everything else. And then Sarah and him are getting pretty old. Abram's about 86 years old. Now, I don't know anybody who's that old. Maybe your grandparents are that old or your great-grandparents. But you know that they're not having babies anymore. So they were thinking, Abraham and Sarah were thinking, so how are we going to have some kids? Because, we're getting pretty old. So they have this great idea that Abraham will marry Sarah's maid, whose name was Hagar. This is a very common practice. If you're not having children, the common practice was to then give your husband your maid, and then that baby would be your baby, and you would bring that up. So that's what they did, and Hagar got pregnant, and she had a baby boy named Ishmael. And Ishmael became the father of all of the Arab nations. Well, that was all great and wonderful, but then Sarah got pregnant herself. Because the Lord promised a nation with Sarah and Abraham as the mother and father. He didn't need Hagar to make this happen. And so Sarah had a baby boy, and they named him Isaac. And they named him Isaac, which stands for he laughs. And again, there's a very important name. You'll have to read in the Bible where Sarah is listening at the tent when the angels of the Lord are saying, you're gonna have a son next year at this time. And Sarah is laughing because she's like, either she doesn't believe it, or maybe she does believe it, and she's so full of joy that the angels have told her she's going to have a baby that maybe she's laughing for joy. I kind of like to think that she was laughing for joy and not like, ha ha ha, that's not going to happen. I think she might have been laughing for the absolute joy of knowing that she was going to get pregnant and have a baby. So Ishmael is born, and after Isaac is born, and after Isaac is born, Sarah starts to get a little jealous of Hagar and Ishmael because Ishmael's older and Isaac's still a baby. He's just being, he's still having a bottle or having breast milk. And so she says, look, you guys got to go because this is the child of the promise, not Ishmael. And so Hagar and Ishmael are sent away, but the Lord did not forget Hagar. Hagar was visited by God in the desert and given water, and they were able to survive. So God is not hard-hearted either. That is a wonderful part of the story for me too. So that is the end of what I was going to talk to you about with Abraham's covenant and Hagar and Ishmael. One of the things I want you to do is look on your card. Remember we talked about circa. That small c stands for circa. And so we know that this time is about circa 280 BC. So around 280 BC. And we also know that Abraham's covenant with the Lord is circa 282 BC. So have a look at those dates, and we'll talk about some dates when we come back together. I'm looking forward to seeing all of you on December 7th, and we'll be doing some fun things together again and seeing each other face to face. Love you guys, and I miss you so much.